The great chamber of the Galactic Council was filled with sound. Hundreds of voices spoke in different tones, from deep rumbles to high whistles, all mixed together like the roar of a storm. The chamber itself was a circle of light and shadow, with tiers of seats rising high up the walls, each seat belonging to a different species. The central floor was empty, polished until it reflected the bright white of the ceiling. Humans sat together at one side of the floor, their delegation small compared to the giants and swarms and clouds of gas that counted as other species. Their leader, Ambassador Rourke, was a tall, straight-backed man with dark eyes that missed nothing. He had been silent for most of the meeting, watching the endless debate, the speeches, the political games across the chamber. The Varnic speaker pounded the table with a heavy claw. "This matter is closed. Humanity will comply. The majority has voted." His voice was sharp, like a blade cutting through the noise. Several other alien leaders nodded in agreement, their eyes or sensory stalks turning toward the humans. The moment the vote was announced, Rourke's expression didn't change, but every human in the delegation leaned back slightly. Something shifted in the air tension, sudden and cold. One of the alien delegates, a feathered being called a Zarin, gave a thin smile. "You see, humans, there is no need for dramatics. This is for the greater stability of the galaxy." No one could tell if Rourke heard the words. Slowly, he placed both hands flat on the table in front of him, stood, and looked around the chamber. Every eye, every lens, every glimmering sensory node followed his movement. "We thank the Council for its time," Rourke said in a calm, even voice. "But humanity will not comply." Gasps and clicks of surprise echoed through the seats.
"Auda!"
Varnic speaker leaned forward. "That is not your choice." Rourke's gaze locked with the speaker's. "It is." Before anyone could speak again, the humans stood up together, chairs scraping against the polished floor. They turned toward the great doors at the far end of the chamber. Their steps were slow, steady. The sound of their boots carried strangely. In the air, like drum beats before a battle, the chamber fell into a deep, uneasy silence. Even the background hum of translation devices seemed to fade. The humans reached the doors. Without looking back, Rourke pressed the control, and the doors slid open with a hiss. They walked through, and the heavy panels closed behind them. The human shuttle cut through the thick lanes of alien traffic like a blade through water. Round it, enormous cargo haulers, sleek diplomatic cruisers, and drifting merchant ships filled the skies over the council capital, each following rigid flight patterns enforced by control towers. The human pilot ignored half of them, weaving the shuttle through tight gaps with a precision that made even the other humans on board grip their seats. Inside,
atmosphere was cold and silent.
Ambassador Rourke sat in the forward cabin, eyes fixed on the shimmering planet below as it began to shrink into the black. He wasn't thinking about the speeches in the chamber. He wasn't thinking about the threats from the Varnic speaker or the sneers from the feathered Zarin. He was thinking about the message he had just sent. 2 words that would change the course of the galaxy: protocol, Iron Dawn. The message had been received by Earth's High Command less than a minute after it left his lips. In a fortified bunker, buried deep beneath the North Atlantic seabed, alarms wailed. Lights flashed red across the long war table, each segment representing a different fleet. Admiral Serrano, commander of the Terran Defense Force, stood with her hands behind her back, watching as digital markers lit up the map. "Bring the readiness." "Index to full," she ordered, her voice steady. Technicians moved with controlled urgency. Doors clanged open across orbital stations, revealing lines of silver warships like the teeth of a predator. On Mars, vast launch silos rotated toward the sky in the Kuiper Belt. Hidden listening posts pivoted their sensors toward the Council's worlds, and on a lonely asteroid far beyond Neptune, something older than the Galactic Council began to stir. A silent machine, its surface covered in a layer of black dust, waking for the first time in centuries. Back on the shuttle, Rourke's aide, Lieutenant Vega, leaned forward. "Sir, do you want me to brief the fleet commanders on the diplomatic fallout?" Rourke shook his head. "No, there's no fallout. There's only what happens next. Vega hesitated. They'll paint us as the aggressors. We've been preparing to do that for years, Rourke said. This just gives them the excuse. He looked out at the stars. And we'll give them a reason to regret it. Meanwhile, in the heart of the council capital, panic was building. Alien News Network's broadcast breaking coverage of the human walkout, replaying the moment in slow motion. Commentators speculated wildly, some claiming humans were bluffing, others insisting that war was inevitable. In bars, in markets, in crowded plazas, ordinary citizens of 100 species whispered about the stories they'd heard. Human war. Fleets that could burn entire worlds. Soldiers that fought even when outnumbered. Weapons that no one else dared to build. In a private chamber high above the main hall, the Varnic speaker met with a select circle of allies. A holographic map of the Milky Way hovered over the table, glowing softly. They have activated their military, the speaker growled. I can feel it in the way they left. The humans are predators. They don't leave without hunting. Insectoid delegate clicked its mandibles. Then we should strike first. Fool, hissed another, its voice like flowing water. You would be the first to die. The humans have outmaneuvered every enemy they have faced in the last century. The speaker's eyes narrowed. Then we must not be enemies. We must contain them. For several long seconds, no one moved. Then the voices began again, louder than before. What does this mean? They are rejecting the authority of the council. Are they? Are they preparing for war? In the upper tiers, a slim figure in a dark robe leaned toward her companion. Do you remember the records from the Koran War? She whispered. The humans didn't warn anyone before they struck. Her companion's frilled head nodded. They are dangerous. Dangerous to let them walk away with pride intact. On the council floor, the Varnic speaker slammed a claw down again. Security, follow them. See where they go. A squad of armored guards left through a side exit, their weapons humming. But Rourke and his people were already gone, in the quiet. Corridors beyond the chamber, the human delegation moved with a purpose. They said nothing to each other, but their pace was quickening. Rourke touched the cum unit in his ear. Initiate Protocol Iron Dawn, he said. On the other end, a voice replied without hesitation. Confirmed. Protocol Iron Dawn activated. Somewhere far from the council homeworld, in the cold dark between stars, silent machines woke from sleep. Lights flashed in hidden bases. Warships began to power up their drives. Back in the chamber, the argument reached a dangerous pitch. Some alien leaders shouted for sanctions. Others demanded calm, fearing a wider conflict. And a few, the oldest species, simply sat in silence, their expressions unreadable. High above, in the private observation deck, Elder Varesses of the Thalon watched the chaos below. She was older than most living beings in the chamber, her eyes dim with age but sharp with memory. She remembered the first time humanity came to the council, carrying no weapons, speaking of peace. She also remembered the stories of what humans did before they joined the wars they fought, the enemies they crushed. They have made their decision, she murmured. The rest of the galaxy will now see what that means. In the corridor outside the chamber, the security guards finally caught sight of the humans. They moved to intercept, but the humans vanished into a private lift that dropped deep into the underlevels of the building. When the guards reached it, the lift was empty. Somewhere in those underlevels, Rourke stood in a dim loading bay. A small human shuttle waited, its engines already warm. As his team boarded, he turned back to look at the ceiling, as if staring through the walls toward the chamber above. They think they've won, he said softly. They have no idea what they've just started. The shuttle lifted off without a sound, disappearing into the endless traffic streams of the council. Minutes later, a coded message left the planet, traveling faster than light toward the Sol system. In the great command bunker beneath the Atlantic, alarms began to sound. Screens lit up with orders. Across Earth's colonies, soldiers checked their weapons. Fleet captains received sealed instructions. The humans had left the chamber quietly. But every leader who watched it happen knew the truth. Silence was never a good sign from humanity, and far out in the void. Something vast and dangerous was beginning to move. The Galactic Council had no idea how little time it had left. Down in the Council archives, a young researcher was combing through sealed files. Her mentor had told her a rumor that centuries before joining the Council, humans had created something the galaxy had tried to bury. She didn't know what. She was looking for, yet only that if the rumors were true, it might explain why the human ambassador had walked out with such certainty. Her search was interrupted by a priority alert. The Council's long-range sensors had detected sudden fleet movements, and not from the humans, far on the rim of the galaxy. An unknown armada was beginning to gather, and as Earth's fleets readied for deployment, neither the Council nor humanity yet knew the most dangerous truth. The real enemy was already moving into place. The Council's great chamber was quieter than usual, but the quiet was not peace. It was the thick, heavy quiet of suspicion. Every alien voice, when it spoke, was lower than normal, every glance sharper. The humans were gone, but their absence filled the room like a shadow that no light could push away. In the upper gallery, alien diplomats gathered in tight groups. They spoke in coded whispers, in voices so soft they barely stirred the air. Words that passed between them carried fear. "They've left the chamber before," murmured a scaled envoy from the southern spiral arm, "but never like this. Never after a direct refusal." Long-bodied creature with luminous tendrils coiled tighter around its seat. "You know the stories? When humans go silent, it means they're choosing who dies first." Another voice cut in sharper. "No, this is politics. They are bluffing." The scaled envoy hissed a laugh. "Do you want to test that theory?" The Varnic speaker sat alone at the central table, talons tapping a slow rhythm on the polished surface. It was not anger, not yet only calculation. Above them, massive holographic banners projected the latest news updates into the chamber. All of them showed the same image: the human delegation walking out, Rourke's unreadable face framed in the doorway, in a shadowed alcove. Ambassador Kreth of the Tihari leaned toward her assistant. "Search the deep records. Look for Earth contingency, the old files pre-membership." The assistant's frilled crest flicked in confusion. "That archive is sealed by High Council order," Brackett Kreth said. "They didn't seal it for nothing." Beyond the Council walls, the city was restless. The capital world had seen its share of political drama, but something about this was different. Crowds gathered around public screens, watching endless replays of the humans leaving without a backward glance. The tension was contagious, merchants. Closed stalls early, patrol drones flew lower, security checkpoints swelled with long lines. In one dim cafe tucked between tall spire buildings, a group of off-duty Council security officers drank in silence. Finally, one of them, a broad-shouldered reptilian named Voresh, spoke. "You all feel it too, don't you?" No one answered, but no one needed to. "They didn't walk out to leave," Voresh said. "They walked out to get ready." Meanwhile, in a secure observation deck hidden deep within the Council complex, a different conversation was happening. "They have activated their fleets," said Elder Varesses of the Thalon, her voice steady. "The humans will not strike yet. They want the galaxy to panic first." A massive crystalline being beside her pulsed faintly in agreement. "Fear is a weapon. One they wield well." "Perhaps," Varesses said, "but I think they know something we do not." Hours later, in the cold corridors of the Council archives, a young researcher named Leo was still digging through restricted files. The room smelled of ozone and dust, lit only by the faint glow of the holographic readers. She had bypassed 3 security locks already, her fingers trembling as she typed. The file she finally opened was marked in crimson: Orion Protocol Human Access. Only inside were fragments of reports from before humanity joined the Council conflicts on the edges of known space. Entire fleets disappearing, enemy forces vanishing without a trace. Every report ended with the same notation: Orion device deployed. "No, survivors." Leo's hands froze over the console. Sound behind her made her turn sharply. A figure stood in the shadow stall, human, watching her without expression. "You shouldn't be here," the figure said quietly. "Back on." The The human flagship, far from the capital, Ambassador Rourke, stood in the war room. Holographic projections showed the positions of Earth's fleets. They were moving fast, not toward the Council, but toward something else. Reports from Deep Watch stations said a captain beside him, an identified armada massing in. The Galactic Rim. Composition unknown. They're not Council ships, and they're not ours. Rourke's jaw tightened, and the Council's about to learn why we walked out. Far away, in the darkness between stars, hundreds of alien warships moved as one. Their hulls were black as space itself, their drives cold, their weapons silent. They were patient. They were waiting, and humanity was the only one that knew they were coming. The great chamber doors exploded open with a crash that silenced the room. The sound was not mechanical failure, not a polite diplomatic entrance. It was the sound of force of intent. Every head, every eye, every sensor turned toward the opening. Through the light spilling from the corridor beyond, the human delegation returned. But they were not the same as when they had left. Gone were the simple diplomatic uniforms. Now they wore black, form-fitting armor that glinted under the chamber's lights. Hard lines of plating covered their chests, shoulders, and legs, each piece designed for both speed and protection. Helmets were clipped to their belts, ready to be snapped on in an instant. Flanking Ambassador Rourke were soldiers tall, broad, and armed. Their weapons were not ceremonial sidearms or compact personal defense tools. These were long, sleek rifles of dark metal and matte finish, each humming faintly with power. To most Council species, the sight of a weapon in the chamber was unthinkable. The silence in the room was suffocating. Rourke walked to the center table with measured, deliberate steps. The soldiers moved with him, scanning the room. Their boots struck the polished floor in unison, a sound like the ticking of a clock, counting down to something inevitable. The Varnic speaker rose halfway from his seat, talons gripping the edge of the table. "What is the meaning of this?" he demanded, voice cracking louder than intended. Rourke did not look at him immediately. He took his place at the table, adjusted his jacket, and only then let his eyes meet the speaker's. This Rourke said is the meaning. He nodded to one of his soldiers. The man stepped forward, a black case in his hands. The case was about a meter long, its surface etched with strange angular patterns. It looked older than the chamber itself. The soldier placed it gently on the table. The sound of it touching the surface seemed to echo far too loudly. From the upper tiers came a voice sharp with fear. "Weapons are forbidden in this hall." Rourke's gaze shifted upward, pinning the speaker in silence. Not when the hall itself is the battlefield. Whispers erupted among the delegates. But they stopped almost immediately when two of the human soldiers moved toward the exits. Standing guard as if expecting the room to turn hostile, the Varnic speaker tried to regain control, his claws clicking. "Together, you will explain yourself, or you'll do what?" Rourke asked softly. It wasn't a threat in tone, but in presence. The question hung in the air like a blade suspended over the entire chamber. From the shadows of the back row, Elder Varesses rose slowly. "This is no bluff," she said, her voice carrying over the stillness. "Humans never bring a weapon unless they intend to use it." The alien delegates shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Some were watching Rourke. Some were watching the case. Some were watching the soldiers near the exits. Rourke placed one hand lightly on the case. "This is a message," he said, "not just for this council, but for the entire galaxy." The Varnic speaker's eyes narrowed. Rourke's lips curled into the faintest ghost of a smile. "We know what's coming. If you won't face it, we will." Gasps, clicks, and hisses rippled through the chamber. A few delegates began speaking urgently into their cum devices. The guards along the walls shifted uneasily, unsure if they should act or stay still. The humans stood firm. The case remained unopened, but every alien in the room could feel it, that whatever was inside would change everything. And somewhere, deep in the black between the stars, the enemy waited, moving closer. The air in the chamber felt heavy, as if the walls themselves were leaning in to watch. Every gaze, every lens, every sensory stalk was locked on the black case sitting before Ambassador Rourke. He rested his hands on either side of it for a long moment, saying nothing. The silence grew unbearable. Few delegates shifted in their seats. The sound of cloth and armor rubbing together, echoing far too loudly finally. Rourke pressed his thumb to a recessed panel. A faint pulse of light ran across the case's surface, tracing the angular patterns like veins glowing beneath skin. The seals hissed open with a sound that made the nearest alien guards flinch. The lid lifted slowly. Inside lay an object that did not belong in this age. It was a shard of metal and crystal fused together, its edges sharp yet strangely organic. Faint blue light pulsed within it, as though it had a heartbeat of its own. Symbols in an ancient human script ran along its surface, their meaning lost. To all but a few, the light grew brighter the longer it was exposed, bathing the chamber in an eerie glow. Several alien delegates recoiled, not from the brightness, but from something they could feel, a pressure at the edges of the mind, like a storm building in the distance. The Varnic speaker's voice was thin. "What is that?" Rourke looked at him as if deciding whether to tell the truth. "This," he said finally, "is the Orion Shard." Murmurs broke out instantly. Some delegates whispered to their aides. Others pulled up data on their personal displays, searching the council archives. The oldest among them froze completely, their eyes widening. They knew. "This is impossible," one of them whispered. "The shard was destroyed before the council was formed." Rourke's voice stayed calm. "That's what you were told. That's what you wanted to believe." It's an insectoid delegate. Clattered its mandibles in frustration. "Explain its purpose." "It is not a weapon in the way you think," Rourke said. "It is every weapon in the way you fear." The pulsing light grew stronger. Holographic screens around the chamber flickered. Translation devices crackled with static. "During humanity's wars, before we joined this council, the Orion Shard was our final measure," Rourke continued. "It can disrupt all advanced systems within 100 light-year ships, weapons, communications. An enemy reduced to the Stone Age in an instant." Several delegates stood, shouting in protest. Others leaned forward, fascinated. The Varnic speaker slammed a claw down. "Why bring this here? Is this a threat?" Rourke's eyes swept the chamber. "This is a warning. Something is coming. You refuse to act. You refuse to prepare. When it arrives, the Orion Shard will decide who lives and who falls." Upper gallery, Elder Varesses rose again, her expression grim. "You think you can force the galaxy to stand together with fear alone?" "Not with fear," Rourke said. He glanced at the shard, then back at her. "With time. This is the only thing that can buy it for us." But not everyone believed him. From the shadows, a tall figure in deep crimson armor stepped forward, an assassin from one of the council's more aggressive factions. A soft click echoed as a weapon extended from their wrist. "Then we'll take it from you," the assassin said. The human soldiers moved instantly, rifles up, energy cells charged. The room erupted into shouts, but Rourke never flinched. "Diaz." Hand hovered just above the shard. "One touch," he said softly, "and every ship in orbit will go dark." The assassin froze. The other delegates went still. The tension in the chamber was now a living thing, and somewhere beyond the council's borders, the unseen enemy fleet crept closer. Oblivious or perhaps nod to the storm building in the heart of the galaxy. The night sky above the council capital blazed with light. It began as a shimmer teeny pinpricks appearing high in orbit, too far for the naked eye to see clearly. At first, the local defense fleet thought they were meteors or debris, but then the pinpricks multiplied. Lines of light stretched into being, elongated, then snapped into the shapes of ships leak. Angular and unmistakably human, they arrived. In silence, hundreds of them, black holes broken only by the dull red glow of weapons charging. The fleet didn't form a defensive wall or a patrol pattern. It formed a noose. From the streets of the capital, millions looked up and saw the human. Ships blotting out the stars. The sight alone sent an ancient primal shiver through species that had never known fear from above. Inside the council chamber, the Orion Shard still pulsed on the table. Every comm device in the room buzzed at once. Rock pressed a finger too. His earpiece, listening. Orbit secured, a calm voice reported. Targets locked. The Varnic speaker stood, his crest flaring with outrage. You dare bring warships into our skies without clearance. Rourke met his glare with something far colder. Clearance is for allies. Gasps rippled through the room. Several delegates immediately began speaking into private comm channels, calling their fleets, ordering reinforcements. But the fear in their eyes betrayed the truth. They weren't certain their fleets would survive the first volley. Up in orbit, the human flagship Sol Invictus broadcast a single message across all frequencies. Every ship, every station, every civilian on the planet heard the same words: Galactic Council. You have 24 hours to respond to humanity's demands. Refuse, and the sky will go dark. The broadcast cut off, leaving only static. In the chamber, chaos erupted. Some demanded immediate surrender to whatever the humans wanted. Others called for the shard to be seized and destroyed. Elder Varesses remained still, studying Rourke. If this is meant to unite us, she said slowly, it may destroy us instead. Rourke's soldiers shifted positions at the exits, sealing them with portable field projectors. No one was leaving without permission. Unity is a choice, Rourke said, but survival will be forced. In a nearby control room, Council security officers monitored orbital scans. One of them frowned, then adjusted the filters. Sir, we've got movement outside the system. What kind of movement? Not human, not Council? On the display, faint blips appeared at the far edge of the system, ships running cold, drifting in formation. Slowly more appeared behind them, their outlines sharp and unfamiliar. The officer swallowed. They're massing. And they're big. Back in the chamber, Rourke received the same data feed. His eyes narrowed. 24 hours, he repeated. Quietly, we might not even have 12. The humans had come to threaten the Council, but something else had come to threaten them all. The human. Flagship Sol Invictus hung in orbit like a silent predator, its black hull bristling with weapons. Below, the Council capital lay in uneasy stillness. Every eye on the planet was fixed on the sky. Inside the war room, Ambassador Rourke stood over a tactical display, its holographic map showing the human fleet in perfect formation. Beside that, a second map flickered in, expanding cloud of unknown contacts at the system's edge. They were still too far to scan in detail, but their sheer number was unmistakable. ETA? Rourke asked. 8 hours at their current speed, the fleet's operations chief replied. Less if they light up their drives. Rourke's jaw tightened. The Council didn't even know the enemy existed yet. And when they found out, they'd panic. On the command deck, crew moved with precise, disciplined motions until the deck shuddered. A deep boom rolled through the hull. Red lights flared. Alarms screamed. Direct hit to the aft section. Someone shouted. Not from orbit, from inside. Smoke filled one of the engineering corridors as blast doors slammed shut. The security team rushed to seal the breach, weapons ready. But the fire wasn't the only threat. The comm network was being jammed, and someone was manually shutting down defensive systems from within. In the chaos, a name came over the security feed. Lieutenant Vigorourke's own aide was flagged as the last person seen near the compromised. Systems. Rourke froze for only a second. Bring her to my live. Minutes later, 2 soldiers dragged Vega into the war room. Her armor was scorched, one arm bleeding, but her eyes were steady. You're working for the Council? Rourke asked. She shook her head. I'm working for the galaxy. You're forcing a war we can't win. Rourke stepped closer, voice low. And what do you think they're going to do when they get here? He gestured to the map of the incoming armada. Vega's eyes flickered to the display and widened. That's not Council, no, Rourke said. That's the reason I walked out of that chamber. Before Vega could reply, another explosion shook the ship. This one was larger. The Sol Invictus's shields flared in half. The fleet's formation shifted to cover it, multiple enemy contacts emerging from dark space. A sensor officer yelled. There. Inside the system already. Rourke turned to his comms chief. Patch me through to the Council chamber. A moment later, his image filled the chamber's central display. Delegates froze as his voice cut through the room. You have less than 8 hours to decide, and now you have more than just us to fear. Outside, the black silhouettes of unknown ships slid into view, their hulls absorbing light, their weapons already aimed. For the first time in living memory, the humans weren't the most dangerous thing in the sky. The Orion shard pulsed faster now, each beat brighter, sharper, almost urgent. Its glow painted the walls of the council chamber in ghostly blue, casting every alien face in stark relief above the planet. The human fleet shifted formation, weapons armed, but not yet firing. Beyond them, the enemy ships moved closer, their black hulls cutting off the light from the stars. Every scan, every reading confirmed the same terrible truth: they were unlike anything in the Council's records. Inside the chamber, Rourke stood. At the central table, the shard in front of him, the Council in uproar. "This is madness," shouted the Varnic speaker. "You brought your fleet here, you brought your weapon here, and now you've brought this enemy down on us." "No," Rourke said, his voice cutting through the noise. "This enemy was already coming. You just chose not to see it." Delegates argued, shouted, accused. Some demanded the shard's destruction. Others called for immediate alliance with humanity and then chaos. A sudden crack of weapons fire echoed through the chamber. One of Rourke's soldiers went down, armor sparking. From the upper tiers, a group of armed figures leaped forward, their movements too fast, too precise. They weren't council guards. They weren't human. The infiltrator's armor shimmered in the chamber's light, fragments of black metal that seemed to shift like liquid. Their weapons were the same strange design as the ships outside. The enemy was already here. Panic swept the chamber. As delegates ducked for cover, security fired wildly. Human soldiers returned fire with calm precision, dropping 2 of the infiltrators. But more poured in through the entrances. Rourke's hand hovered over the shard. "This will take down everything in the system," he warned over the chaos. "Ships, weapons, shields, ours, and theirs." Elder Varus stepped forward, ignoring the weapons fire. "If you use it, we'll all be defenseless." "I don't," Rourke said. "You won't live long enough to regret it." The shard's light grew blinding. Its hum deepened into a low, bone-shaking vibration. Outside, the human fleet tightened formation, bracing for whatever was about to happen. The enemy ships moved faster, their weapons charging. A single infiltrator broke through the human defense line. Lunging for the shard, Rourke slammed his hand down. The world went white. Every light in the chamber died. Every weapon fell silent. Outside the human fleet, the Council's defense ships, and the enemy armada all went dark in unison, drifting powerless in the void. For a moment, there was no sound but the breath of those still alive. Then, in the darkness, Rourke's voice came low and steady. "Now, we fight on equal ground." Somewhere in that black silence, the first strike of the real battle began.